Boldwood presents Snowflakes Over Primrose Woods, written by Jill Steeples and read by Corin Cass. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Lizzie Baker was an early riser, but even so, the insistent knocking on her front door at 7:30 on a Saturday morning took her by surprise. She couldn't think who it might be. She wasn't expecting any deliveries, and anyone who knew her would surely have texted first to warn of their impromptu impending arrival. She took a sneaky peek through the thick velvet curtains in her bedroom window, but it offered no clues apart from the sight of a dark saloon car pulling away and disappearing around the corner at the bottom of her road. Perhaps someone had popped something through the letterbox, probably another one of those charity Christmas brochures. She had quite the collection accumulating on her kitchen table. Rat-a-tat-tat. There it was again. Whoever it was, they were persistent and obviously not going to take no for an answer. With a sense of curiosity bubbling in her chest, she padded down the stairs and gingerly pulled open the door. A blast of cold air rushed past Lizzie as she took in the scene before her, her mind trying to make sense of it all. Good job she was hanging onto the door, or else she might have fainted on the spot. "Hello, Mum." "Katie, what on earth are you doing here?" "Nana! Nana!" Rosie, Lizzie's little granddaughter, who she'd wished a happy 3rd birthday to only a week ago via the wonders of modern technology, twirled around on the spot on the doorstep, waving a fairy wand in her hand. Was it a dream? Had her family really been magicked all the way here? Lizzie blinked her eyes open and shut a couple of times to make sure. They were actually here in the sleepy little village of Applebury, not on the other side of the world in an apartment in Sydney. But why? Come in, come in." Lizzie ushered them inside, away from the perishing cold of the late November morning. She peered into Katie's arms to see little Pip fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the enormity of the occasion. Lizzie had so many emotions fighting for attention in her head, happiness, excitement, and apprehension, along with a dozen questions waiting to trip off her lips, but really she didn't know where to start. Besides, Katie was looking weary and in desperate need of a cuppa. "Let me put the kettle on and find a drink for you, Rosie." "Oh, come here." She whisked Rosie up in her arms, hugging the little girl close to her body, laughing as Rosie's cold nose touched her own. "I really can't believe it," she gasped, pulling her daughter into her embrace too. "But where's Brad?" she asked, the thought only just occurring to her. "We've left him behind," said Katie matter-of-factly. "What?" "Oh, only until he's worked out his notice," she quickly added, seeing her mum's stricken expression. "He's got another 2 months out there, so I thought we might stay with you while I try and find us somewhere to live." "Well, of course you can. You know that. This is your home, but I had no idea any of this was in the offing." "I wanted to surprise you, Mum." "Well, you've certainly done that," said Lizzie, laughing, still shaking her head as she went to pop the kettle on. Katie saw to the children, placing the sleeping Pip on the sofa, while Rosie slipped off her rucksack and, eyes wide, wandered around the living room, her little hands reaching out to touch all of her Nana's trinkets, eliciting a kindly but firm warning from her mum. A few minutes later, after having eaten a very welcome ham sandwich, Rosie made herself at home and snuggled up on the sofa beside her baby brother, her eyes soon fluttering closed, and she was fast asleep in next to no time. "Bless her, it's no wonder she's completely exhausted," said Lizzie, peering over at her from the other sofa. "Travelling all that way." "I know it might seem a bit mad, but once I got the idea in my head, that was it. I had to do it. I can't tell you what a relief it is to be home, though." Katie hugged her mum so tightly, Lizzie wondered if she might ever let her go. When they'd finished their tea, Katie lifted her feet up onto the sofa and allowed her head to nestle onto her mum's lap. "You know, I haven't been happy for months now. I never really settled in Oz, even though I tried hard to. With Brad out at work all day and me with a new baby at home, I found it hard to adjust. I missed everybody here so much, but especially you. I sometimes wonder if I didn't try hard enough, but I just found it so difficult. Overwhelming, really." Katy gave a heartfelt sigh. "It's all your fault, Mum." "What?" Lizzie stopped with her mug halfway up towards her mouth and ran her other hand through Katy's hair. She'd known Katy had found it difficult settling into their new way of life overseas, but Lizzie had hoped that, given time, she would have grown to love and embrace the new opportunity. Now Katy looked up at her mum and smiled. "I missed you too much. Besides, I want you to be a part of the children's lives on an everyday basis so that they can really get to know you, and not just have you as a face at the end of an internet connection, someone who they might only get to see every few years. It's not the same." "It isn't," Lizzie agreed, "but it was the next best thing in the circumstances." The family had made regular weekly video calls, and Lizzie had read stories and sung songs to little Rosie from across the ether. They'd formed a lovely relationship of sorts, but Katy was right. It could never replace the familiarity and closeness that came from sharing at first hand the daily ups and downs of family life. "When you came to stay in the summer, Mum, it made me realise just how much we were missing out on. Rosie loved having you around, and everything seemed so much easier with you being there. I just want to be close to my mum. That's not too much to ask, is it?" "Not at all, but what about Brad? How does he feel about all this?" "You know Brad. He's pretty easygoing. He knew it wasn't working out for us as a family, so he's been looking around for a while now. The good thing is that this new lectureship position he's found means he can carry on with the research work he's been doing in Oz. It's a brilliant opportunity, and the uni is only a 20-minute drive from here." She clapped her hands together excitedly. "His mum and dad are thrilled that we'll be back home again." At least someone was in on what was going on, mused Lizzie. Her expression must have given away her own bemusement. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mum, that I didn't say anything earlier, but once Brad's new job came through, I thought what a great idea it would be to surprise you. I swore his parents to secrecy." Lizzie laughed. "Don't apologise. I'm over the moon that you're here. What a Christmas this one will turn out to be. It's just a bit of a shock, that's all." "It's a shame Brad can't be here too, but we'll celebrate again when he finally comes home in the new year." "Well, it sounds as though you have it all worked out." Lizzie, whose head was still buzzing from the early morning's strange turn of events, gave a thought to Brad, left behind in Australia, and hoped he was as happy with the arrangements as Katy insisted he was, but perhaps he was relishing the idea of some peace and quiet for a few weeks. Katy took a sip of her tea, her gaze drifting around the room. "You haven't got your Christmas tree up yet," she said, sounding disappointed. "Oh, I know." Usually by this point in the season, Lizzie would have all her decorations up, but she'd had a change of plan. "I'm having a real one this year." The silver tinsel artificial tree had served her well for several years, but it was a little threadbare these days and looked rather sorry for itself. She'd felt a pang of guilt at the thought of not indulging in the annual ritual of scrabbling around in the loft, pulling out her old faithful friend, but it was about time she made some changes about the place, even if she had no intention of ever throwing out her little old tree. That was definitely a step too far. "Bill and I are going over to Primrose Woods in the week to pick out a tree together. Sam said he'd sort out a decent one for us." "How lovely. I can't wait to meet Bill in person, even though I feel as though I know him already. We'll come with you if you like. Rosie will love to do that. She's been so excited for Christmas this year. She's convinced it's going to snow, bless her. I've tried to tell her that it's very unlikely, but she's not having it. Hopefully, with all the decorations and the lights and her presents, she'll quickly forget about the white stuff. That reminds me, I've had some of our belongings shipped over, and they should be arriving on Monday. I'm sure we'll find somewhere to store them, won't we?" she said, her gaze wandering off again. Lizzie nodded, puzzling over where exactly she might find some space in her little house for Katy's gear, but she wouldn't worry about that now. There was always the garage. Besides, she suspected Katy wasn't waiting for an answer, It was more a statement of fact. Katy stood up and checked on the children, tucking their blankets around them tighter. She stretched her arms over her head and settled down beside them, resting her head on a cushion. "It's so lovely to be home. I really hope I haven't upset your plans for Christmas." She smiled, stretching and yawning extravagantly. "How could you ever?" For the first time in years, Lizzie was actually looking forward to Christmas instead of dreading it. It was her first Christmas with Bill, and they'd made all sorts of plans. A trip to the theatre was on the cards, along with a visit to the Christmas market in town, a tea dance at the Grand Hotel, a meal at a French restaurant on Christmas Eve, and then Bill's daughter Abbey and her partner Sam were coming for lunch on Christmas Day. On Boxing Day, they were intending to collapse in a heap on the sofa with a plate of cold meats and bubble and squeak, accompanied by a glass or two of red wine. A very grown-up kind of Christmas. Only it looked now as though some of those plans might have to be changed in the wake of Katy's arrival. Still, the more people around her Christmas table, especially her family, the merrier. It would be a lovely Christmas, just not the one she'd originally planned. "You haven't upset my plans at all," she said, noticing as she looked up and across at Katy that she wasn't listening at all. She was snuggled up with the children, fast asleep on the sofa. And Lizzie's entire being warmed at the sight, realizing that all her Christmas dreams really had come early. Chapter 2. Abbey drew up outside her cottage after a hectic day at the care home. Most days at Rushgrove Lodge for the elderly were demanding in their own way, but at this time of year, with so many activities organised for the residents, it was extra busy. And extra fun, too. She turned off the ignition and glanced at her watch. As much as she loved the excitement in the run-up to Christmas, what she didn't enjoy so much was the dark and cold winter nights. She shivered as she climbed out of the car, opened the gate, and hurried along the footpath, turning her key in the lock. In the summer months, she'd be heading off for a walk at Primrose Woods at this time of day, but there was no possibility of that now, and she had to leave her fix of the great outdoors until the weekends or her days off. Indoors, she turned on the table lamps, the red and white candle arches on the windowsills, and the twinkly fairy lights across the mantelpiece. Although it was still only the 1st of December, she'd already received a handful of Christmas cards which looked pretty dotted around the small living room. She bent down to light the wood-burning stove, bringing a blast of warmth into the room, and she lit the cluster of pillar candles in the surround, along with the Advent candle for the first time. She stood in the centre of the room, looking all around her. Those little touches made the house seem so welcoming and cosy. Upstairs, she changed out of her trouser suit and put on some jeans and a fluffy jumper. She was just untying her bun, allowing her auburn hair to fall onto her shoulders, when she heard the front door open and the familiar sound of paws scrabbling excitedly over the wooden floor. A cold blast of air whooshed up the stairs with Sam and his Springer Spaniel lady's arrival. Abbey hurried down to greet them, seeing Sam wrestling with a Christmas tree to get it through the front door. "Oh, look at that. It's absolutely perfect. Just put it up against the window for now and we can decorate it after dinner." "Oh, thanks, Sam. Don't you just love Christmas?" "I love you more," he said, wiping his hands down on his work trousers before holding out his arms to Abbey, who walked into his embrace. She took a deep breath, inhaling his lovely scent, wholesome, outdoorsy, and with a hint of pine needles right now. Sam worked at Primrose Woods as a senior ranger, which was where Abbey had first set eyes on him. His tall and broad physique was easy to pick out in his distinctive uniform of green cargo trousers and sweatshirt bearing the name of Primrose Woods, and there was no denying his obvious good looks. Ordinarily, his role encompassed conservation and preservation of the woodlands and heaths, giving guided walks and talks to visitors, and undertaking practical work in managing the hundreds of acres of the country park. In December, though, it was all about the Christmas trees. His days spent overseeing the smooth running of the yard, selling a variety of trees in all different shapes and sizes. Abbey grinned, looking up into Sam's eyes, his deep brown gaze always having the power to enthrall her. He pulled her closer, his lips finding hers, his touch sending ripples of delight to the top of her head and down to the end of her toes. "I love you too, Sam," she said, coming up for air. So what if Sam didn't share her slightly over-the-top enthusiasm for the festive season, looking on with bemusement when she squealed with delight at having found yet another sparkly decoration that she simply had to add to her collection, or when hearing one of her favourite Christmas tunes on the radio, she felt compelled to sing along with it. It was only because Sam hadn't experienced the joy of a truly magical Christmas, that's what Abbey told herself, and why she was determined to make this year, their first Christmas together, as special as possible. "Let me go and change and then I'll start on the dinner." Sam shrugged off his green Primrose Woods hoodie, throwing it over the newel post at the bottom of the stairs. "I'll fix us a drink as well." "Go on," he said, grinning. "I know you're desperate to get started on that tree." While Sam disappeared upstairs and the sound of the shower whirred into action, Abbey heaved the tree into the waiting stand and started pulling out the branches, tweaking them this way and that, restoring the tree to its natural shape while the scent of the pine needles assaulted her senses. She stood back to admire her handiwork. Even in its unadorned state, it looked utterly beautiful and Christmassy. She went across to the cupboard beneath the stairs and pulled out the boxes of decorations, itching to look inside. She loved revisiting the shiny baubles in different shades of red, green, silver, gold, and white, and handling the hanging ornaments like the toy soldier and the winged angel, her fingers running over their intricate design. Most of all, she loved the decorations that had belonged to her mum. They were kept in a pretty red hexagonal decoupage box, and when Abbey peeked inside, she felt a pang of nostalgia at the sight of the trinkets that had held special significance to her mum and reminded her of past Christmases. It was a bittersweet moment. She popped the lid back on the box, for fear of damaging the treasures inside, and put them to one side. She'd keep them safe until she was ready to decorate the tree. When Sam reappeared a little while later, showered and changed into jeans and a navy V-neck jumper, she couldn't resist throwing her arms around his neck and kissing the tempting curve of his collarbone. That freshly smelled scent straight from the shower was just as enticing as his natural, earthy aroma that came from a day working outside in the elements. You smell good enough to eat." "While that is a very tempting idea, I should probably make a start on the dinner." Sam grinned. "Let me sort us a drink first." Reluctantly, and with a kiss to her forehead, Sam peeled himself away from Abbey and wandered into the kitchen, opening a cupboard to pull out 2 wine glasses. "Here we go." Moments later he was back, and handed Abbey her wine, his gaze alighting on the doormat. "Look, there's some cards over there to add to your ever-growing collection." "Oh, yes." Abbey turned and scooped up the letters from the floor, peering at the postmarks to see where they might have come from. "Ah, this one must be from Auntie Helen and Uncle Rick in Dorset." She pulled out the card, showing a jolly Santa sitting abreast a chimney stack, and popped it up on the mantelpiece with the others. "And this one," she ripped off the envelope, "is from... Oh, that's lovely. It's from Connor and his girlfriend Ruby. Oh, look, and there's another card in here." Sam placed a hand on her arm as he peered over her shoulder at the card in her hand. "Connor?" "Yes, you know Pierre, my best friend from school. Well, he's her older brother. We were a right pain to him back in the day, but he did look out for us. He's a really great guy. Oh, look, there's a wedding invitation in here too. That's lovely news. Abbey plus guest?" She looked up at Sam, grinning. "That must mean you, I'm guessing. If you want to go, of course." Abbey ran her fingers around the edges of the white embossed invitation, a pang of regret twisting in her stomach. Earlier this year, she'd been planning her own wedding, sending out her own invitations, excitedly making plans for a future that she had no idea was about to crumble around her when she discovered Jason, her ex, had been cheating. It was an awful time, having to give up on all her hopes and dreams, the hurt and humiliation she felt, absolutely crippling. When she looked back, all she remembered was the black clouds of disbelief, pain, and anger. Thank goodness for Primrose Woods. The country park on her doorstep turned out to be a lifesaver at the time, a happy place to escape to, somewhere it was impossible to stay sad for too long. That, along with a certain somebody coming into her life when she was at her lowest ebb, was the only thing to have got her through that terrible time. She looked up at Sam now, a familiar sense of relief washing over her. To think that if she hadn't found out about Jason's deceit, then she would never have got together with Sam in the first place, and she might have so easily missed out on meeting her soulmate. What a scary thought that was. "Sounds good to me," said Sam, heading back into the kitchen and putting the frying pan on the stove, pouring in some olive oil. "Are you sure?" Abby said, moving into the centre of the room so that she could see Sam in the kitchen. "I can remember you telling me the first time that we met, actually, that you thought weddings were overrated." "Did I?" He paused, spatula in hand, turning to look at her, his brow creasing as he tried to remember the occasion. But I'd just found out that you were meant to be getting married that day. I was only trying to make you feel better." She chuckled. He'd certainly managed that. The lunch at Lizzie's, who she'd only recently met at the Treetops café in Primrose Woods, was such a happy and joyous occasion for her and her dad. There wasn't any other way she would have wanted to spend her non-wedding day. "You did make me feel better, although I think the bottle of homemade damson gin you brought along played a big part in that too." "Okay, so you're not totally averse to weddings then," she said, a hint of playfulness in her tone. "Definitely not. Well, I've no objection to going along to one, if that's what you mean." Sam returned his attentions to the frying pan, the aroma of shallots and garlic now reaching her nostrils in the other room. It wasn't what she meant at all. She knew Sam wasn't the marrying kind, but did it really matter? Her abandoned marriage to Jason had taught her an important lesson, that the biggest, most extravagant wedding in the world didn't mean a thing if you didn't have the love of that special person. Now she'd found that true and real love with Sam, and that was much more important than the big wedding she'd dreamed of ever since she was a small girl. Wasn't it? Chapter 3. Rhea drove into the car park at Primrose Woods and parked in front of the row of towering redwood trees. She took a moment to steady her breathing, soaking in the scenery. Her hands had grown clammy on the steering wheel on the way over, and she could feel a heat pinging at her cheeks. "Get a grip," she told herself. Her gaze searched out the silver hatchback she was looking for, and her heart gave a little leap of triumph when she spotted it. Decisively, before she could give in to the nerves bubbling inside, she jumped out of the car and wandered over, attempting to look casually cool, but feeling horribly self-conscious. She'd imagined this moment for weeks, seeing Luke again, after almost 3 months apart. She'd imagined what she might say, something meaningful to convey just how much she'd missed him, and what he would say in return, the significance of the occasion resonating with them both. Instead, seeing him again in the flesh now, all she managed was a pathetic hello and a gormless expression. "Hey, Rhea." His face lit up in a wide smile, and she felt a surge of relief and happiness. Any awkwardness evaporated in the cold winter air as she reacquainted herself with his bright blue eyes and the sound of his voice, her insides warming to the sight of him, his ability to make her heart stop for the briefest moment undiminished in the months since she'd last seen him. "It's great to see you again," she said. Rhea had been home from her backpacking adventure in Australia for almost a month now, and she'd been anxiously counting down the days until she would see Luke again. Part of her, a small part of her, had held the faintest hope that he might have been there waiting for her at the airport on her return, a big smile on his face, telling her how much he'd missed her and how he would never let her out of his sight again. But despite telling herself she shouldn't get her hopes up, she'd still been wholly disappointed when that scenario had never materialised. Trouble was, she'd clearly thought about Luke much more in the intervening months than he'd thought about her. They'd kept in touch while she was away. She'd sent him an endless supply of photos, videos, and funny memes, and he'd always responded enthusiastically, or at least she thought he had. Now she wondered if he'd only been being polite. "And you too, Rhi, come here." He wrapped her in a big hug before holding her at arm's length to look at her properly. "You look great. The trip obviously did you the power of good." "It really did," she enthused. "I'm so glad I took the plunge and did it, or else I might have missed out on the opportunity forever. It was wonderful. I missed the sunshine and the friends I met, but, it's good to be home too." She could hardly tell him that he'd been with her every step of the way around Australia, in her thoughts, her mind frequently straying to what he might be doing at any given time, if he might be thinking about her too. She'd wondered if her time away might have lessened her feelings for Luke, but if anything, they'd only grown stronger in the meantime. "Come on." He held out his arm with an air of confidence, and she happily linked arms, secretly thrilled to be so close to him again. "Let's walk," he said. "It's far too cold to be standing around for too long." She took a deep breath, feeling her cheeks tingle with the cold. It was great to be back at Primrose Woods, the sharp nip in the air heightening her excitement and anticipation. It was the natural place for them to meet, as it was the setting for many other walks they'd shared together before she'd headed off abroad. There was something about being amongst the trees, walking side by side, at one with nature, that made it easier for her to talk, to feel a connection with Luke that wasn't always possible in the hubbub of a bar or restaurant. She took a sideways glance at his profile. He was more handsome than she remembered him to be, if that was even possible. "So, how are things going with you? Sounds as though you've been incredibly busy." "I have. Sorry it's taken me such a while to find a day to do this, but it's been hectic. Not sure if I mentioned it, but I'm leaving Jansen's on Friday." "Are you?" She feigned nonchalance. He hadn't mentioned it. She would have remembered if he had. The fact that he hadn't told her made her feel inconsequential, as though he didn't even consider her in any of his plans. "Yeah, I can't wait to get out of that place." "It was the best thing I ever did," admitted Rhi. "Yeah, it definitely went downhill the day you walked out. I don't think the company ever properly recovered." "Stop it," she laughed, relieved that they could immediately fall back into the easy teasing and joking that had always been a feature of their conversations. The job Luke was leaving was where they'd met, working in the same department for a multinational telecoms company. Rhi cringed when she thought of how she'd treated Luke back then. She'd barely given him the time of day, ignoring his friendly overtures and treating him with haughty disdain. She'd been far too enamoured with Jason, a senior manager at the time. Brash and confident, Rhi had been taken in by his charms, something that had puzzled her ever since. What on earth had she seen in him? He'd promised her a future together, but when she found out he'd been feeding her a pack of lies and was actually engaged to be married, she didn't think twice. She stormed out of the relationship and her job on the same day, putting as much space between herself and Jason as she possibly could. Luke was the only person from the office to reach out to her in the following days to make sure she was doing okay. Out of the hurt and humiliation of that period, she'd been truly grateful to Luke for his support and kindness. A friendship had grown from that connection, but what had surprised Rhi most of all was just how lovely and kind Luke really was beneath his smart and funny exterior. She'd hoped their friendship might develop into something more, but despite her best intentions, it hadn't happened, and they were still very much in the friend zone, even if her heart was telling her something else entirely. "So tell me about the new job. When do you start?" "The second week in January. I've found a flat not too far from the new office and I move in just after the new year. I'll have a couple of days to get myself sorted and then it'll be straight to work.
You're moving too. Crikey, there's lots of big changes for you in the pipeline then. Where will you be based?
Dashford-upon-Avon.
Rhi could hear the excitement in his voice, but something crumpled inside her. She kept her focus on the path ahead of them, attempting not to show her disappointment. She listened attentively as Luke went on.
It's a similar role to the one I was doing at Jansen's, but with more responsibility. I'll have my own sales team to manage. It will be a challenge, but one I'm ready for now.
It sounds amazing. Congratulations, she said brightly, masking the sadness she felt inside. I always knew you were destined for great things.
Ha, of course you did, he said with a wide grin.
Luke was moving over 100 miles away. How could their relationship ever develop into anything further now, with them living in different areas of the country? She had to accept that she'd missed her opportunity as far as Luke was concerned, although it wasn't for lack of trying on her part. Maybe she needed to accept that he wasn't into her in the same way that she was into him. They walked along the marked woodpecker trail on the path lined with tall, towering trees. There was a definite nip to the air, the ground crunchy beneath their feet, the tips of the branches spun with frost, creating a magical winter wonderland scene. Rhi was wrapped up in her fur-lined parka with boots and a woolly hat, with only her face exposed to the air, the sensation of the cold on her skin invigorating and energizing. This area, the beauty around her, couldn't have been more different from what she'd recently seen in Australia. There she'd spent most of her trip in shorts and a t-shirt, the sun blazing down on her bare limbs as she explored the vast and spectacular landscape, marveling at the blue of the ocean and the endless sky. It had been an eye-opening and wonderful adventure, but being here in Primrose Woods was every bit as awe-inducing. Walking along the familiar trail transformed by the advent of winter, she definitely felt as though she'd come home, and being with Luke only heightened that sensation. At the bottom of the path, they took the small, rickety bridge that crossed the stream, Luke lending her a hand as he led the way. He had no way of knowing how much pleasure that small gesture brought her. "Are you looking forward to it?" she asked.
"Can't wait," he said with such passion that she knew already his heart was somewhere else. "Anyway, enough about me. What about you?" he asked as she jumped off the end of the bridge onto the ground, still hanging on tight to his steadying hand. "Sounds as though you're going to be just as busy."
"I hope so. I'm really excited to be setting up the business and working for myself. It's what I've always wanted to do. The website is ready to go live, and I've already found one customer. I'll be looking after the social media accounts for the Three Feathers. I'm talking to a couple of other companies too, and it's looking promising." She crossed her fingers in the air. "I'll still be doing a few shifts at the pub, though, just until I have enough clients to pay the bills each month."
"You'll make a success of it, Rhi. I know you will." This get-up-and-go spirit was something he'd always admired about Rhi. She was enthusiastic, resourceful, and capable. Okay, so maybe she was spontaneous and hot-headed at times too, but he knew she would take that passion into this new venture and make it work. "Where will you be working from?"
"Well, that's the good thing about being a virtual assistant. I can do it from anywhere. Initially, I'll be working in the spare bedroom at home, but I want to move out as soon as I can, find a little flat somewhere. Mum has got a new boyfriend, you know."
"Really?"
Luke's eyes widened, dropping his head to one side for her to expand.
"That's great."
"I know, I'm made up for her. She's said for years that she would never get involved with another man after Dad, but Rob came along and—" She held her hands up to the air as though she couldn't quite believe it herself. "It happened. They fell in love, just like that." It wasn't lost on Rhi that her mum's love life was so much more successful than her own. "Rob seems like a genuinely nice guy and makes her happy. Trouble is, I feel like a third wheel when he's around. They're at that lovey-dovey stage." She gave a mock groan. "Besides, it's about time I found a place of my own." Shall we head for the café? Luke asked, a little while later as they walked past the lake. The Treetops Cafe was abuzz with visitors that morning, the hubbub of conversation and the aromas of warm bread, coffee and cakes mingling in the air, welcoming them indoors. Lizzie waved and came out from behind the counter, greeting them warmly. "Well, it's lovely to see you two together again." She wrapped them both in a big hug. "Look, there's a table over there by the window. Go and grab a seat, and I'll be over in a minute to take your order." Rhi took off her hat and gloves, tidying them away on the seat beside her as her gaze was distracted by the chalkboard with its array of tempting delights. Today's special menu included a sweet potato and Bramley apple soup, turkey sandwiches with cranberry sauce and pigs in blankets, and a Stilton and ham quiche. The smells emanating from the kitchen were totally enticing. Rhi would definitely come back for lunch one day, but for now she would be happy with a cake from one of the glass-domed serving dishes at the front. Trouble was, she was spoilt for choice, changing her mind several times before finally plumping for a cranberry-spiced muffin, while Luke chose a slice of gingerbread, with them both opting for a cream-topped hot chocolate to drink. "There you go, my lovelies." A little later, Lizzie delivered the cakes and drinks, placing them on the table, a big smile on her face. "I'm going to take 5 minutes," she said, pulling out a chair and sitting down with her friends. "Isn't it lovely to have our girl back?" She turned to Luke and took hold of Rhi's arm. "She told me all about her adventures the other week. It sounded amazing. It seems like a lifetime ago that we flew out to Australia together, when in reality it was only a matter of a few months. You know, I would never have got out there in the first place without you two urging me on, so I have a lot to be grateful for to the pair of you. I got to see Katie and her family for the first time in years, which made me very happy, and you got to have the holiday of a lifetime. Anyway, it's so lovely to have you both back here in the cafe together." "It's great to be back," Rhi said, "although have you heard the news? Luke's moving away after Christmas." "No, you're not, are you? Where are you going?" Lizzie leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table.
"I've got a new job. It's in Dashford-upon-Avon, so I've found a place to live up there."
"That's a lovely part of the country and good news for you, but we'll miss you round here, won't we, Rhi? Especially on quiz night."
"Well, it's not a million miles away, and I'll be coming back pretty regularly to see my folks, so you won't be getting rid of me completely."
Lizzie exchanged a sympathetic look with Rhi, as if she realised what disappointing news this must be for her.
"Anyway," said Luke with a smile, "how's life with you, Lizzie?"
"Great, although it's been hectic." She wiped her arm across her brow. "Did you hear that Katie is home? She turned up unexpectedly at the weekend with my grandchildren in tow. What a shock that was. I thought something terrible must have happened, but no, she thought she'd surprise me." She gave a rueful smile. "She certainly did that. They're coming home permanently, which is obviously wonderful news for me, no more trips to Australia, and Katie's come ahead to find somewhere to live. They'll be staying with me until she does. It's a bit of a shock to the system to have a full house again, but it's great timing. Spending my first Christmas with the grandchildren will be such a treat. The little ones, oh, they are such a joy, but I'd forgotten how exhausting children can be. It's almost a relief to be able to come to work to get a little respite from it all." Despite her good-natured grumbling, Lizzie's eyes shone as she spoke, and it was clear to see her pride and delight in having her family underneath her roof again. "We've got Abby and Sam coming for Christmas too. I'm not sure how we'll all fit around the table, but we'll make it work somehow." Lizzie glanced up and across to the door where a group of customers had arrived together. "I could sit here and chat all day long, but I shall have to go and do some work." She stood up, tucking her chair beneath the table. "You know it's quiz night next week, the last one before Christmas. Are we all going?" "Try and stop me," Rhi said keenly. "I missed it while I was away, and I'm just pleased you've kept my place in the team open for me. I was worried you might find someone else to fill the spot. You know, someone who actually knew a few answers." Rhi giggled, but really it was a huge relief to know that some pretty girl hadn't taken her place on the quiz team and in Luke's affections too. Trouble was, there would be another space on the team after Christmas, but who could ever fill Luke's shoes? "No, never," said Lizzie, her eyes wide with outrage. "You're a great asset to the team."
"And if it's any consolation, we didn't do any better without you being there," said Luke.
"Thanks for that," Rhi laughed, unsure of whether it was a compliment or an insult. "We'll see you there then." Rhi and Luke held up a hand each to Lizzie as she darted off to see to her new customers. "She's so lovely, isn't she?" Rhi said.
"A proper sweetheart."
Rhi tucked into her muffin, picking up every last crumb on her plate with a fingertip, savouring each delicious mouthful. They drank their hot chocolates, laughing as they tried to negotiate the mountain of whipped cream on top, inevitably ending up with cream on their noses and around their mouths, and not caring in the slightest. When she'd finished, Rhi sat back in her chair, her hands resting on the table in front of her. Her fingers played with the turquoise thread bracelet on her wrist.
"It survived the trip then,"
said Luke, his gaze dropping to her fingers. "I've not taken it off since you gave it to me. It was my lucky talisman." The unexpected gift from Luke just before she left for Australia had taken her completely by surprise, and she'd been touched by his kind gesture. For her, it was so much more than a sweet going-away present. It was a token of their growing friendship, and she'd felt certain it had been Luke's way of letting her know just how much she meant to him. Every time she'd looked at the pretty bracelet thousands of miles away from home, she felt a connection to Luke, as though his support and encouragement were radiating across the ocean. Now, in the busy café, she wondered if she'd read far too much into his gesture. Could it have simply been just one friend looking out for another? Now it looked as though her hopes for anything other than a friendship with Luke were dashed again.
"Everything okay?"
Luke's question broke into her daydreaming. "Yes," she said, looking up into his bright blue eyes, forcing a smile. "Everything's great." Although, if she was being honest with herself, she wasn't sure that it was. Chapter 4. "Wish me luck." Abbey grabbed her laptop bag and her coat from the hall stand before checking her reflection in the full-length mirror for the umpteenth time that morning. Most days, she didn't give a second thought to her appearance. Usually, some black trousers and a blouse or jumper would do, along with a quick coating of mascara and a dab of bronzer. Today, though, she wanted to make a good impression. After much deliberation, she had plumped for a bottle green knitted dress with her brown knee-length boots, easy to wear but stylish too. She'd tied her auburn hair back in a smooth bun, allowing a few loose tendrils to fall around her face, and she'd taken an extra few minutes applying her makeup.
"Good luck, although you won't need it."
Sam took hold of Abby's wrists and looked intently into her eyes.
"You're brilliant at your job, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Especially that new hotshot general manager. He only has to ask anyone at the home, residents or staff, to quickly realise what a great job you do."
Abbey let out an involuntary sigh, grateful for Sam's support, but not sharing his confidence. "The trouble is, from what I've heard, he has a completely different style of management to the old company, to what I've been used to all these years. He's all spreadsheets, budgets and targets. I just hope he's not going to implement too many changes."
"There's no reason why he should. Your latest care inspection was excellent. If they can find no reason for concern, then why should he?"
"You're right," said Abbey, feeling marginally appeased by Sam's positive words. "Well," she glanced at her watch, "I suppose I ought to get going. I can't put this off any longer."
"Come here."
He pulled Abbey into his arms, and she allowed her head to fall onto his chest, exhaling a deep breath as she snuggled into the safety of his embrace.
"You'll be fine. And—"
He held her at arm's length now, as his gaze ran the length of her body.
"You look absolutely amazing. Really, go and knock them dead."
Lady the Springer Spaniel ran in circles around Abby's feet as though she was in complete agreement with Sam. He would say that, Abby thought, smiling, his encouraging words ringing in her ears. She enjoyed the short drive through the country lanes that wended their way through the neighbouring villages and led to Rushgrove Lodge for the elderly, situated in a beautiful spot. It gave her thinking time. She was still nervous, but it made all the difference knowing she had Sam's full support and encouragement. Arriving at work, she didn't have time to dwell on the impending visit from the big boss, because she had several emergencies awaiting her as soon as she stepped through her office door. One of the care workers had called in sick, so Abby was straight on the phone, finding a replacement to cover the day shift. Reg Catling, who would be one of her favourite residents, if she were allowed to have favourites, had had a fitful night with a troubling cough, and despite his protests that it was only a niggle, Abby wasn't happy with the way he was presenting, and she quickly put a call into the local GP surgery to request a visit from the doctor. Then she had to face the issue of the heating in the ground floor annex, which had clanked to a halt in the early hours, and Abby's pressing concern was making sure her residents were kept warm. She organised Peter, the lodge's maintenance man, to put an electric heater from the stores into each of the rooms as a stopgap measure until the heating was back up and running. "You probably need this," said Lydia, her assistant, placing a welcome mug of coffee next to Abby's computer when she finally got back to sit behind her desk in her office. "Thanks, and that's before I've even started on my to-do list yet," she said with a rueful smile. "Well, I'm not sure you'll have much of a chance now, as Matt Walsh just called to say his previous appointment's been cancelled. He should be here any minute." "Really?" Abby let out a sigh, thinking she could have done with a quiet hour or two to finalise the arrangements for next week's carol concert. The local primary school would be visiting and putting a show on for the residents. It was an annual event, and one which was a highlight on the lodge's social calendar.